Nurse Mara Vale had one hand on the velvet rope when Colonel Silas Voss looked at the tattoos crawling from under her sleeve and said, "Stay back." The hospital auditorium went quiet for one breath. Then the officers near the stage laughed as if the warning were a joke meant for everyone except her. Mara did not move. Behind the colonel, under white ceremony lights, a glass case held an old combat helmet, a faded field jacket, and a black patch no one in that room was supposed to recognize. But Mara recognized the patch. She recognized the missing stitch at the corner. She recognized the name card beneath it too, because it was wrong. And if she stepped forward, the lie buried for 12 years would finally have to breathe. Before this story unfolds, tell us where you are watching from in the comments. If stories of hidden service, old scars, and public justice mean something to you, subscribe and stay with Mara until the truth inside that patch is finally named. The ceremony had been planned for weeks, and every corridor of Bay Harbor Military Medical Center carried the proof of it. Flags hung from the upper balcony. Fresh flowers lined the entrance to the auditorium. The brass nameplates on the first row of seats had been polished until the faces of passing nurses bent across them in gold. On the stage, beneath a dark blue curtain, stood a covered display case with a silver plaque that read, "Operation Nightglass Memorial Recognition." Mara had read the plaque once that morning, and not again. She was not supposed to be part of this ceremony. That had been made clear by the email sent to the entire nursing staff, then clearer by the whispered reminder from administration that only uniformed honorees, commissioned guests, donors, and approved hospital representatives would be allowed near the stage. Mara was a trauma nurse. She wore navy scrubs under an old olive jacket with frayed cuffs. Her left forearm carried dark ink lines that began at her wrist and disappeared under her sleeve. Some people saw the tattoos and saw rebellion. Some saw history they did not want to ask about. Colonel Silas Voss saw an inconvenience. He had arrived at the hospital 6 months earlier as the new military liaison, and from his first day, he treated the medical staff as if they were furniture arranged for his reputation. He smiled for cameras, tightened his jaw for enlisted families, and used the word honor so often that Mara had stopped trusting it when it came from his mouth. At 10 minutes before the ceremony, she was crossing the side aisle with a tray of folded programs when she saw the glass case uncovered for inspection. She stopped before she meant to. Inside was a field jacket, not hers, not exactly. The same pattern, the same faded green cloth, the same left shoulder seam repaired with field thread. Beside it sat a battered helmet with a strip of tape across the back rim. A black patch lay flat under a pin light. Its design was simple. A white line crossing a dark square like a door opening in a blackout. At the bottom corner, one stitch had been pulled crooked, leaving a tiny gap shaped like a hooked tooth. Mara's fingers tightened around the tray. She had sewn that stitch. A young resident walking behind her bumped her shoulder. Programs spilled in a soft white fan across the carpet. "Careful," he said, annoyed before he looked up. Then he saw who she was and smirked. Didn't see the artwork. The two nurses beside him laughed quietly. Mara knelt and gathered the programs without answering. She could hear the auditorium filling now, chairs creaking, medals rushing against dress uniforms, families whispering in the rows. The ceremony was not for them, not really. It was for the hospital board, the cameras, the framed narrative Colonel Voss intended to deliver about sacrifice and command. Then Mara saw the name card under the patch, recovered insignia of Lieutenant Aaron Rusk, Medical Support Volunteer, Operation Nightglass. Her breath stalled. Aaron Rusk had never worn that patch. He had never been medical support. He had not been in the South Corridor when the power went out. He had not carried the boy down 3 floors with smoke swallowing the stairwell. He had not pressed the helmet into Mara's hands and told her, "If you get out, make sure they know where we were." Mara stood too quickly. One of the programs bent in her hand. "Colonel," she said. Silas Voss was beside the stage speaking with a hospital director and a Navy chaplain. He turned just enough to show he had heard, but not enough to grant her respect. "That name card is wrong," Mara said. The director's smile stiffened. "Nurse Vale, the ceremony is beginning. The patch doesn't belong to us." Voss looked at the tattoos on her wrist, then at the old jacket she always wore when the hospital air turned cold. "This is not your department. IT is, if you're about to honor the wrong record." A few heads turned in the first rows. An older man with a cane leaned forward. A photographer lowered his camera. The air shifted, not yet toward belief, but toward spectacle. Voss stepped down from the stage. He was tall, silver-haired, pressed into a dark service uniform that made every movement seem rehearsed. He stopped a few feet from Mara, close enough that the medals on his chest caught the same light as the patch inside the glass. "Stay back," he said. The words snapped across the auditorium. Someone laughed near the stage, then another. The sound spread just enough to make Mara feel 12 years younger and 1,000 miles away from this polished room. Voss smiled without warmth. "This is a military recognition ceremony, nurse, not a place for personal theories." "I'm not giving a theory. You are interrupting a memorial." The accusation landed harder than the laughter. Mara could have said the name then. She could have spoken the radio code, the true location, the 3 words that still woke her at night. But in the front row sat a woman in a black dress holding a folded flag against her chest. Mara recognized the face from the old casualty file. Aaron Russ's mother, older now, smaller, waiting to hear her son praised under a lie she had been given, because the truth would have destroyed more than one family. Mara looked at the glass case again. The helmet faced slightly left. Inside the rear rim, beneath the tape, there would be initials scratched with a field knife. She knew that because she had watched them being carved in her room, lit only by emergency red lamps. "Please," she said, softer now. "At least check the helmet." Voss' eyes narrowed. "You don't give me orders. I am asking you not to put a false name on something that carried people home." The laughter died, but not because they believed her. It died because they realized she was not embarrassed enough to retreat. A young nurse named Jenna Cho stood in the side aisle, holding a stack of guest badges. Jenna had worked with Mara for 3 years, long enough to know that Mara could handle angry families, alarms, and broken equipment without raising her voice. But Jenna had never seen the color leave Mara's face like this. "Colonel," Jenna said carefully, "my BB, we can pause for 1 minute and verify the inventory sheet." Voss did not even look at her. "No." The hospital director touched his sleeve. "Silas, the Admiral's convoy is 2 minutes out." "They shall know exactly how long we have," Voss said. That was when Mara heard the name whispered behind her. "Night glass." It came from the second row, from an old veteran in a wheelchair whose hands trembled on a wooden cane across his lap. His name was Thomas Keene. Mara had seen him in the ward twice that month, silent both times, his daughter doing most of the speaking. Now he stared at the patch as if the room around it had disappeared. Voss's face hardened. "Mr. Keene, please remain seated." Keene did not blink. That patch wasn't Russ. The auditorium went still. Mara turned toward him, and for one dangerous moment, grief broke through the discipline she had built around herself. Voss saw it. So did everyone else. "You two know each other?" he asked. Keen's eyes moved to Mara's sleeve, to the black ink just visible there. "Coordinates, a broken radio frequency." 3 initials no one at the hospital had ever been able to read. He swallowed. "No," he said, but his voice failed him. Mara understood. He was afraid too. The side doors opened, and a line of military police stepped in ahead of a white-haired man in navy dress blues. The room rose at once, chair legs scraping back, applause beginning before anyone had been told to clap. Admiral Grant Halbrook had arrived. Mara stepped back on instinct, not from Voss, but from the weight of the past entering the room wearing stars. The Admiral moved slowly down the aisle, acknowledging salutes with a restrained nod. He was older than the photos in the hospital lobby, his face carved by years and command, but his eyes missed nothing. They crossed the flags, the stage, the display case, Voss standing too rigid, Keen sitting too pale, and finally Mara, frozen beside the fallen programs, with her old jacket sleeve pulled over her tattoo. For half a second the Admiral's step changed, only half a second. Then Voss walked forward with a broad ceremonial smile. "Admiral Habrook, Bay Harbor is honored." The Admiral accepted the greeting, but his gaze returned once to the patch. Mara lowered her eyes. She had spent 12 years making sure men like him never had to say her name in public. Now the room was preparing to do exactly that, but for the wrong person. The ceremony began, because ceremonies often begin, even when truth is standing in the aisle asking them not to. Mara took her place near the side wall, half hidden by a column and a folded flag stand. Nyana tried to move beside her, but Mara gave one small shake of her head. "Don't. Not yet." The hospital director welcomed the guests. She spoke of service, sacrifice, partnership between battlefield medicine and hospital care. She thanked donors, officers, surviving families, and the archival team that had restored a forgotten object from an obscure operation. Mara heard the words as if through water. Forgotten, obscure, restored. Nothing about night glass had been obscure to the people trapped inside it. Colonel Voss stepped to the microphone next. His voice filled the room with trained gravity. 12 years ago, in a hostile region whose details remain partly classified, a joint medical extraction team entered a compromised civilian clinic under emergency conditions. Among them was Lieutenant Aaron Russ, whose courage under pressure allowed wounded civilians and service members to survive until evacuation. Today, we return to his family a piece of that history. Mara looked at Mrs. Rusk in the front row. The woman's fingers pressed into the folded flag. Keen whispered something Mara could not hear. Voss continued. For many years, the artifacts recovered from Operation Nightglass were mislabeled in temporary storage. Under my review, and with support from Command Archives, we have restored Lieutenant Rusk's association with this field jacket, helmet, and insignia. Mara's stomach turned. Under my review. The words were not a mistake. They were a signature. Jenna, still by the aisle, unfolded one of the ceremony programs and scanned it. Her expression changed as she read. Mara saw her eyes flick to the display case. Then to Voss. The program listed the artifacts. The helmet was described as Rusk Field Helmet, recovered South Corridor. The jacket as Rusk Emergency Medical Garment. The patch as Nightglass Volunteer Medical Insignia. At the bottom, in smaller print, a credit line thanked Colonel Silas Voss for identifying and authenticating the collection. Jenna moved slowly toward the back exit. Voss reached the part of his speech meant to break hearts. In chaotic conditions, records are sometimes incomplete, names are lost, locations are confused. But honor demands reconstruction. Honor demands that we restore the brave to their rightful place. Mara closed her hand around the seam of her jacket. Inside the lining, sewn where no one could see, was a small square of black cloth. Not the patch in the case, but its twin. She carried it because she had been ordered not to. She carried it because the man who gave it to her had smiled like someone trying not to be scared and said, "Hide this," until they stopped lying. They had never stopped. A camera crew panned across the audience. Mara shifted behind the column, but Voss noticed. He always noticed anything that could ruin a picture. "Before we unveil the display," he said, looking directly at her now, "I want to acknowledge how easy it is for those outside the chain of command to misunderstand the burden of military record-keeping. A murmur passed through the audience. Mara knew what he was doing. There are rumors around objects like these, Voss said. Personal attachment, misremembered stories, individuals who see themselves in histories that do not belong to them. Several people turned toward her. The resident who had mocked her tattoos leaned toward another doctor and whispered, not quietly enough, "He means her." Mara did not move. Voss gestured toward the glass case. "That is why we rely on documentation, not sentiment. Documentation." Mara almost laughed. She had watched documentation become a weapon. She had watched pages disappear from a secure file because a commander's mistake could not survive daylight. She had watched her own service reduced to a blank line marked administrative correction. Jenna returned through the side door carrying a thin folder. She stopped when she saw Voss still speaking and slipped behind the last row. Mara caught her eye. Jenna mouthed, "Archives." Mara's pulse quickened. Admiral Halbrook sat in the first row, hands folded, expression unreadable. He had not interrupted Voss. He had not asked why a nurse had challenged the display. He had not acknowledged Keen's whisper. But twice now, Mara had seen him look at the helmet instead of the speaker. Voss invited Mrs. Rusk onto the stage. The auditorium softened. Whatever doubts had stirred were pushed aside by the sight of a grieving mother being helped up the steps. Voss offered her his arm with perfect ceremony. Cameras lifted. The chaplain bowed his head. Mrs. Rusk stood beside the display case, her lips trembling as she faced the audience. "I was told," she said, reading from a folded paper, "that my son did not have time to be afraid." Mara's throat closed. "I was told he stayed with the injured until the end." Keen made a sound in the second row, not quite a sob. Mara's hand went to her own wrist. Under the tattooed coordinates, she could still feel the pressure of a different hand gripping hers in the dark. Aaron Rusk had been afraid. So had all of them. Courage had not meant absence of fear. It had meant moving anyway. Mrs. Rusk looked at the patch in the case. "I never saw this before. But Colonel Voss told me Aaron wore it." Mara stepped forward before she decided to. "No," she said. The word was not loud, but the microphone carried silence better than sound. Every face turned. Voss's smile vanished. "Remove her from the aisle." Two military police shifted near the doors. Jenna hurried toward Mara, with the folder clutched to her chest. "Wait," Jenna said. "There's an archive discrepancy." Voss descended from the stage. "Nurse Joe, sit down." Jenna stood her ground, though her voice shook. "The artifact sheet you cited has a secondary entry. It says the patch was originally logged under an unknown courseman designation, not Rusk's. The entry was changed 6 months ago. That reached the audience differently." A few officers looked at one another. The hospital director's posture stiffened. Admiral Halbrook turned his head at last, fully, toward Jenna. Voss held out his hand. "Give me the folder." Jenna hesitated. Mara knew the next move. He would take it, dismiss it, bury it. He had probably buried worse. "Jenna," Mara said softly, "bring it to the Admiral." The room inhaled. Voss' face flushed. "You will not bypass command in my ceremony." Admiral Halbrook spoke for the first time. "Colonel, one word." "Quiet." "Enough." Voss turned, then forced his expression back into obedience. "Sir, this is a minor internal matter. Then, it will withstand being read." Jenna walked down the aisle as if crossing thin ice. She handed the folder to the Admiral. Mara watched his hands open it. He did not rush. He read the top page, then the next. His face did not change, but the skin around his eyes tightened. Voss tried to recover the room. "Sir, with respect, archival transfers from that period are notoriously unreliable." He kept reading. Mara took another step forward, close enough now to see the helmet inside the glass. The tape On the rear rim had been replaced. Too clean, too new. Someone had covered the old marking. The realization moved through her like cold water. They had not simply misnamed the artifact. They had hidden the initials. Mara looked at Voss. He saw that she knew. For the first time since she had met him, fear crossed his face before pride covered it. "Nurse Vale," he said sharply, "you have disrupted a military family's moment with unfounded claims and personal theatrics. You will leave this auditorium." Mara could hear the door guards waiting. She could also hear Mrs. Russ crying quietly on the stage. That was what kept her from shouting. The truth had teeth. It could bite the innocent first. "I will leave," Mara said, after someone lifts the tape inside that helmet. A stir moved through the audience. Voss laughed once, harsh and too loud. "Listen to yourself. A nurse with tattoos and a jacket from a thrift store thinks she can authenticate classified military artifacts by peeling tape off a helmet." The resident near the aisle snorted. Someone else laughed, but weakly this time. Mara reached up and unbuttoned the top of her old jacket. Her fingers were steady now. She pulled the left side open just enough to show the inner lining. Sewn inside, black on faded green, was the twin patch. The auditorium fell into a silence so deep that the camera shutter sounded like a crack. The patch was smaller than the one in the case, worn, frayed, but its white line crossed the dark square in the same impossible angle. At the bottom corner, the stitch was missing in the same hook shape. Jenna covered her mouth. Keen bowed his head. Voss stared at the patch as though it had crawled out of a grave. Mara looked only at Mrs. Rust. "I'm sorry," she said. The older woman gripped the side of the display case. "Why do you have that?" Mara could not answer without opening the whole sealed room of memory. Not yet. Not in front of cameras. Not while Voss still held the microphone like a weapon. Admiral Halbrook closed the folder. "Open the case," he said. Voss turned. "Sir, I recommend we pause and clear the auditorium before open it." The order did not rise. It did not need to. The hospital director fumbled for the security key. Her hands shook so badly the key missed the lock twice. When the glass lid finally lifted, the room seemed to lean toward the stage. Halbrook stood and walked to the case. He did not touch the jacket or the patch. He reached for the helmet. Mara's heart beat once hard. Voss stepped toward him. "Admiral, with respect, that helmet was stabilized by preservation staff. Removing the tape could damage." Halbrook looked at him. Voss stopped. The Admiral turned the helmet carefully in his hands. The tape on the inner rim was pale, archival, too new for a battlefield relic. He lifted one edge with his thumbnail. Mara could not breathe. The tape came away slowly. Under it, scratched into the inner rim, were 4 letters. MV7. No one spoke because no one knew yet what they meant. Except Mara. Except Keen. Except perhaps the Admiral, whose fingers tightened around the helmet as if the weight of it had doubled. Mara closed her jacket. Voss took one step back. The Admiral looked across the stage, over the rows of uniforms and cameras and witnesses, straight at Mara. But he did not say her name. Not yet. Instead, he asked, "Who altered this display?" The question did not sound like ceremony anymore. It sounded like command. Voss recovered faster than Mara expected. "Sir," he said, "artifact restoration required interpretive decisions." The initials were ambiguous. We had no confirmed record of an MV attached to night glass. Keen laughed from the second row. It was a broken, bitter sound. Voss turned on him. "Mr. Keen, this is not helpful." The old veteran lifted his trembling hand and pointed at Mara. She was there. A wave of whispers moved through the room. Mara looked at him sharply. "Thomas." He flinched at the use of his first name, not from fear, but memory. "You said you didn't know her," Voss said. Keen's eyes filled. "I said no because she asked me to, 12 years ago. The room changed again. You could feel it in the shift of shoulders, the lowering of phones, the uncertainty in people who had laughed too quickly. Admiral Halbrook set the helmet back into the case. Explain. Keen gripped the arms of his wheelchair. His daughter, seated beside him, whispered, "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes," he said. "I do." Mara stepped toward him. "No, you don't." He looked up at her. "You carry silence long enough." Those words struck deeper than Voss's insult ever could. Keen had been younger then, a communications specialist with a cracked radio and a face gray from smoke. He had been one of the last to leave the clinic. He had begged Mara to give a different name to the debriefing team because his mistake, a missed relay, had sent them toward the wrong stairwell. Mara had refused to blame him. Later, when command needed someone to absorb the missing minutes, they found a dead lieutenant and a nameless nurse easier than a living chain of command. Keen had survived. Mara had survived. Aaron had not, and the file had learned how to lie. Voss raised his voice. "This is absurd. A traumatized patient is misremembering a classified event under public emotional pressure." Mara's expression hardened. "Don't use his trauma to paperwork. You have no standing here." Admiral Halbrook turned. "Colonel Voss." Voss stopped, but the damage was done. The audience had heard the contempt now without ceremony around it. Jenna opened the archive folder again. "Sir, there's another page." The Admiral held out his hand. She gave it to him. This was attached to the transfer record but not included in the display packet. Jenna said, "It's a medical intake summary from the evacuation ship." Mara looked away. She knew that page, not because she had seen it, but because she had lived the moment behind it. The brightness of the ship's infirmary, the questions coming too fast, the person asking her name while she kept trying to tell them there were still two people inside. Halbrook read. Voss watched him, read with a stillness that was almost panic. The Admiral voice was quiet. "Female medical officer, unidentified, tattoo marking, not present at intake, severe exhaustion, refused sedation until all evacuees accounted for." He looked at Mara's forearm. "No name." Jenna shook her head. "The line is redacted." "By whom?" Jenna turned the page. "Correction authority listed under Joint Records Liaison, Temporary Command Review. Initialed SV." Every face turned to Colonel Silas Voss. Voss did not blink. "I was assigned to Records Review years after the operation. Redactions were standard." Mara looked at him with a sadness that surprised her. "You weren't just assigned." His eyes sharpened. "Careful. You were outside the clinic." A murmur rose. Voss stepped toward her. "You are making allegations you cannot support." "I heard your voice on the radio." The Admiral's gaze moved between them. Mara felt the room pulling at her, demanding the whole truth, but the whole truth was not clean. It did not make heroes and villains in simple lines. Voss had been outside because command had ordered him to establish perimeter coordination. But when the South Corridor collapsed, he had refused to redirect the extraction path. Not out of malice, Mara had once told herself. Out of calculation. Out of the terrible instinct to preserve command structure over human voices calling through static. And Aaron Rusk had gone back anyway. Mara's tattooed wrists burned beneath the lights. The coordinates inked there were not decoration. They were the hallway where names got separated from bodies, where a patch was torn in half so truth could be carried by someone living. Mrs. Rusk stepped down from the stage. "Please?" she said. "Was my son there?" Mara turned to her. The room softened again, but this time it was not ceremony. It was pain. "Yes," Mara said. "He was there." Mrs. Rusk's face crumpled with relief and dread at once. "Was he brave?" Mara did not look at Voss. She did not look at the cameras. "He was afraid." "He said so. Then he went back anyway." "That is braver than never being afraid." Mrs. Rusk pressed the folded flag to her chest. Voss seized on the answer. Then the ceremony stands. Lieutenant Rusk remains the appropriate honoree. No, Keene said. The old man's daughter tried to quiet him, but he lifted his voice. Rusk didn't wear the patch. She did. Mara closed her eyes. The room erupted in whispers. Admiral Halbrook raised one hand, and the sound fell. He looked at Mara's jacket. Where did you get the second patch? Mara's answer came slowly. It was given to me. By whom? She looked at Mrs. Rusk. The older woman understood before the words came. Her hand flew to her mouth. Aaron, Mara said. Mrs. Rusk sat down hard in the nearest chair. Mara took one step toward her, but Voss moved first, not to comfort the mother, but to regain the stage. This is exactly why public speculation is dangerous, he said. A grieving family is being manipulated by a staff nurse with unknown motives and unverifiable claims. That word did it. Unknown. Mara's entire life at the hospital had been built under that word. Unknown tattoos. Unknown reason for avoiding ceremonies. Unknown reason for wearing an old jacket in summer. Unknown reason for leaving the room whenever someone praised clean heroes. She had accepted the word because silence protected people. But silence had become a tool in Voss's hand. Jenna stepped beside Mara. She is not manipulating anyone, Jenna said. Voss turned on her. You are relieved from ceremony duty. I'm not on ceremony duty anymore. A few nurses near the back straightened. It was small, but Mara saw it. People who had laughed were no longer laughing. People who had been afraid to look at her were looking now and seeing not scandal, but a woman standing alone too long. Admiral Halbrook addressed Mara again. Do you have identification connected to Operation Nightglass? No. Any service file? No. Any reason? Your name would be removed from the records. Voss folded his arms as if the absence proved everything. Mara looked down at the old jacket. She had not planned for this day. She had never imagined a public ceremony would put the patch under glass with the wrong name. But she had kept one thing beyond the patch. Not because she wanted proof, because she could not throw away the last voice that had called her by who she was before the file erased her. She reached into the inner pocket of the jacket and pulled out a cracked plastic badge holder. Voss's eyes widened. The badge inside was old, water-damaged, and faded, almost white at the edges. The photo was barely visible. The name line had been scratched, as if someone had tried to remove it with a blade. But beneath the clouded plastic, a stamped unit code remained. GMAD 7. Jenna whispered. Mara held it out, not to Voss, but to Admiral Halbrook. He took it with both hands. The moment he saw the unit code, something in his face changed. Not shock exactly. Recognition fighting grief. Where did you get this? He asked. It was mine. Voss laughed again, but now the sound had no audience. Convenient. Mara did not answer him. The Admiral turned the badge over. On the back, nearly hidden under a strip of old adhesive, someone had written a radio phrase in black marker. Say patchlight if command fails. Halbrook stared at it. The auditorium seemed to disappear around him. Who wrote this? He asked. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. Chief Daniel Harker. At that name, the Admiral closed his eyes. For the first time, the room saw not a commander, not a guest of honor, but an old man receiving a message that had taken 12 years to arrive. When he opened his eyes, he looked at Voss. Chief Harker's final transmission was sealed. Voss's jaw tightened. Many transmissions were sealed. Not many used patchlight. Mara felt the past rising too fast now. The dark corridor, the failing radio, Harker pressing the badge into her palm, Aaron tearing the patch from his own sleeve because hers was lost in the scramble, Keene whispering that command would blame him, the child crying behind the medication carts, Mara saying, I'll go last. and meaning it until hands stronger than hers shoved her through the exit. Admiral Halbrook faced her fully. "What was your role?" he asked. Voss cut in. "Sir, we cannot accept a self-declared role from." "Silence," Halbrook said. The word struck Voss like a closed door. Mara had spent years imagining what she would say if someone finally asked. The truth had seemed enormous in memory, too heavy for language. But in the auditorium, under lights, with Mrs. Russ weeping quietly and Keen shaking in his chair, it became simple. "I was a nurse attached to the extraction team," she said. "Not commissioned, not decorated, not supposed to be in the file after the correction. My job was to keep people alive until someone with a higher rank decided they matter. No one moved." "And the patch?" Halbrook asked. Mara touched the lining of her jacket. It marked the medical route after the power failed. White line through black square. "Follow the line. Find the door." Keen began to cry silently. "That was you," Jenna whispered. "The route marker in the survivor stories." Mara looked at her. "It was all of us." Voss found his voice. "There are no survivor stories in the official record." "That's the problem," Jenna said. A sound moved through the nurses at the back. Agreement, soft but growing. Admiral Halbrook lifted the cracked badge again. "Who ordered your name removed?" Mara looked at Voss. Voss's face had gone still. "Don't," he said. "One word, not command now. Plea." And that was the cruelest part. Mara had hated him more easily when he was only arrogant. But now she saw the younger officer inside him. The one who had made a terrible choice and built a career out of never turning around to look at it. Mrs. Russ rose from her chair. "I deserve to know," she said. Her voice was small, but every uniform in the room heard it. Mara could not protect Voss from that. She could not protect Keen from memory or herself from being seen. She could only choose not to let Aaron's mother receive another polished lie. After the evacuation, Mara said, the command review changed the route timeline. It listed Aaron as medical lead because he died in the corridor and could not contradict it. It marked the surviving nurse as unidentified because my presence proved the route had been open longer than command admitted. Voss stared at the floor. "Who signed it?" the Admiral asked. Mara's mouth felt dry. "Silas Voss." The room did not explode. It froze. Sometimes truth enters loudly. Sometimes it arrives so clearly that no one can hide behind noise. Voss looked up. "I followed legal instruction." "Did you alter the artifact file?" Halbrook asked. He corrected an ambiguity. "Did you cover the initials inside the helmet?" Voss did not answer. That answer traveled through the auditorium more powerfully than confession. Jenna looked at Mara, then at the helmet, then MV7, she said. "Mara Vale, Medical 7. Mara flinched. Hearing it aloud hurt more than she expected. The Admiral was still holding the badge. "Not Medical 7, he said quietly. Mara looked at him. Halbrook turned the badge toward the audience. Med 7 was Night Glass Medical 7. The call sign attached to that unit in sealed naval traffic was Patchlight. Voss closed his eyes. The Admiral looked back at Mara, and Patchlight had a name. Mara's heart stopped for one suspended second. All morning people had called her nurse, disruption, staff, tattooed, unknown. Voss had called her outside the chain of command. Others had laughed at her jacket, her ink, her refusal to step away from a display case. Now Admiral Grant Halbrook stood in front of the entire hospital auditorium, in front of cameras, officers, grieving families, nurses, and the man who had buried the record. He held the helmet marked MV7 in one hand and the cracked badge in the other. Then the Admiral said her name, Mara Vale. The sound moved through the room like a flag being lifted from a coffin. Mara did not cry at first. She simply stood there as if the name belonged to someone behind her. someone younger, someone kneeling in a corridor with a flashlight between her teeth, someone who had waited 12 years to be called back from the word unknown. Hal Brooks' voice deepened, formal now, but not cold. Myra Vale, Night Class Medical 7. Field nurse attached to emergency extraction under sealed authority. Unrecorded survivor. Primary route marker. Witness to the South Corridor evacuation. The first op came from Keane. Mrs. Russ covered her face. Jenna reached for Mara's hand and did not let go when Mara's fingers trembled. The officers who had laughed near the stage stood rigid now, their faces drained. The resident who mocked her tattoos looked down at the carpet. The hospital director seemed unable to decide whether to apologize or disappear. Voss remained standing, but whatever ceremony he had built around himself was gone. Admiral Halbrook faced him. Colonel Voss, you will surrender all artifact custody documents to my office before leaving this room. Voss's voice was hoarse. Sir, I request private review. You had 12 years of privacy. The sentence struck harder than anger. Two military police stepped closer to Voss. They did not touch him. They did not need to. His authority had already been removed in the eyes of everyone watching. Mara wanted to feel victory. Instead, she felt, sir, the truth had not brought Aaron back. It had not made Nightglass less dark. It had only opened the sealed room and let everyone see how long she had been standing inside it alone. Mrs. Russ walked toward her. Mara stiffened. There were accusations she deserved. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe the wrong story? Why did you carry my son's patch and leave me with a plaque? The older woman stopped in front of her and looked at the hidden patch sewn into the jacket lining. Did he give that to you? She asked. Mara nodded. Mrs. Russ touched the frayed edge with 2 fingers. Was he alone? Mara's voice broke. No. The mother closed her eyes. Thank you. Mara shook her head. You survived, Mrs. Rusk said. Sometimes surviving is all a person can carry. That was when Mara cried. Not dramatically. Not the kind of crying cameras loved. Just a quiet breaking at the edges, one hand over her mouth, Jenna's hand still holding hers. Admiral Halbrook gave the room time. That was another kind of command. Then he turned to the audience. This ceremony will continue, but not as written. Voss's head lifted. Halbrook looked toward the hospital director. Remove Colonel Voss prepared remarks from the program. The director nodded quickly. To you, Mrs. Rusk, the Admiral continued. Bay Harbor owes a corrected account of your son's courage. He was brave. He went back. He placed proof into the hands of the nurse who carried the route out. Mrs. Rusk wept openly now, but her shoulders were steadier. To you, Mr. Keene, Halbrook said, turning toward the wheelchair. Your testimony will be taken with protection. No survivor will be shamed for needing 12 years to speak. Keene bowed his head. And to Nurse Mara Vale, the Admiral said. Mara looked up. Halbrook stepped down from the stage until he stood in the aisle where Voss had told her to stay back. The difference was not lost on anyone. You were ordered out of the record, he said, but you remained in the lives of the people you saved. I cannot restore every year that silence took from you, but I can begin by refusing to let this hospital call you unknown again. He turned to the display case, placed her badge beside the patch. Mara recoiled slightly. That badge isn't for display. It is not a trophy, he said. It is evidence. She looked at the cracked plastic in his hand. For years she had kept it in the pocket closest to her ribs. It had become less an object than a wound she could touch. Letting it go felt like losing the last private part of the people who had trusted her. But then she saw Mrs. Russ staring at the false name card. Myra nodded. The Admiral placed the badge inside the case, not under the spotlight, but beside the helmet. Then he removed the printed card naming Aaron as owner of the patch. He did not tear it. He handed it to Jenna. "New card," he said. Jenna blinked through tears. What should it say? The Admiral looked at Mara. She could have chosen her full truth then. Rank, unit, call sign, all the sharp pieces, but her eyes went to Mrs. Russ, then to Keen, then to the nurses at the back who had watched one of their own humiliated, and had slowly found the courage to stand straighter. "Say it belonged to the road team," Mara said, "and that Aaron Russ carried it until he gave it to someone who made it." Holbrook studied her. "You are still protecting the dead." "I'm telling it right." He nodded once. Nah, wrote with careful hands. "Group Team Patch. Operation Nightglass. Carried by Lieutenant Aaron Rusk. Preserved by Nurse Mara Vale. Nightglass Medical 7. When she placed the handwritten card inside the case, the room seemed to breathe. For the first time since the ceremony began, Voss looked smaller now. Not because his body had changed, but because his certainty had. He stared at the new card as if it were a door closing on the life he had built. Mara approached him. Jenna whispered, "You don't have to." "I know." Voss did not meet her eyes at first. When he finally did, his face held anger, shame, and something like relief buried so deep it barely showed. "He could have come forward years ago," he said. Mara nodded. "Yes. Why didn't you?" "Because every time I tried, someone reminded me what the truth would cost the families." His mouth tightened. "And because a part of me believed you," she added. "When you said silence was service." Voss looked away. "It wasn't," Mara said. "It was fear wearing a uniform." The words landed between them without hatred. Admiral Holbrook signaled to the military police. Voss was guided toward a side room, not dragged, not humiliated for spectacle. That mattered to Mara more than she expected. Justice did not need to become cruelty to be complete. As he passed the aisle, the resident who had laughed stepped aside quickly. Voss did not look at him. He looked once at the helmet. Then he was gone. The ceremony resumed without music. No one knew whether to sit or stand until Admiral Holbrook motioned gently for the audience to be seated. The hospital director returned to the microphone, but her hands shook too badly to hold the script. After a moment, she set the pages aside. "I owe Nurse Vale an apology," she said. Mara closed her eyes. The director looked toward the nursing staff. "And I owe this hospital one too. We accepted appearances where we should have asked questions. It was not enough. It was a beginning." One by one, the ceremony found a different shape. Mrs. Russ spoke not from the prepared statement, but from memory. About a son who used to repair his own jacket cuffs because he hated throwing things away. Keen spoke only 3 sentences, but they were enough. She marked the door. She made us follow the line. "I am alive because she refused to go first." Mara stared at the floor while he said it. Jenna stood beside the display case and read the corrected card aloud. Her voice faltered on Mara's name, then steadied. When Admiral Holbrook returned to the microphone, he did not deliver a grand speech. He spoke like someone placing stones carefully on a grave. "History is not made honorable by being clean," he said. It's made honorable when we stop cleaning away the people who made survival possible." Mara felt those words settle over the room. The Admiral then asked her to come forward. Every instinct in her resisted. She had spent years serving from the edge of rooms, behind curtains, beside beds, in hallways after families left. Attention felt dangerous. Applause felt like weather before impact. But Jenna squeezed her hand. Mrs. Rusk nodded. Keen lifted 2 fingers to his brow in an unsteady salute. Mara walked to the stage. No one laughed now. The tattoos on her arm were visible beneath the lights. Coordinates, a frequency, 3 initials, a small black square with a white line through it. ink near her wrist long after the patch was sewn away. They were no longer decorations to be judged by people who knew nothing. They were a map of who had been carried with her. Admiral Halbrook stepped aside so she could stand before the display case. The helmet sat open, MV7 visible on the inner rim. The old jacket lay beneath the light. The patch was no longer alone under the wrong name. Beside it rested her cracked badge. Mara touched the glass. For a moment she was not in the auditorium. She was back in the dark corridor. But the memory had changed. It was still painful. It always would be. Yet now the door at the end was open, and voices were calling names into the light. She turned to the microphone. The room waited. Mara had not prepared remarks. She had spent 12 years preparing not to speak. "My name is Mara Vale," she said. The sentence shook, then held. "I am a nurse at this hospital. Before that, I served where records say I did not. I am not here to take honor from Aaron Russ. He earned every word of love spoken for him today. I am here because objects remember things people try to erase." She looked at the patch. This patch was not a medal. It was a promise. "Follow the line. Find the door. Bring someone with you if you can." Mrs. Russ pressed a hand to her heart. Mara continued, "I kept it hidden because I thought silence protected the people who were gone. But silence can be stolen. It can be used by people who need the truth to stay small." Her eyes found the nurses at the back. "So if you are watching this and you are the person everyone tells to stay back because of how you look, what you carry, what they think you are worth, remember this. Sometimes the one pushed to the edge is the only one who knows where the door is." No one moved for a second after she finished. Then Keen began to clap. His hands were weak, uneven, but the sound carried. Jenna joined. Mrs. Russ joined. The nurses at the back stood first, then the families, then the officers who had spent the last hour learning the difference between rank and courage. The applause rose around Mara, like something she did not know how to receive. She looked at Admiral Halbrook. He saluted her, not a casual nod, not a symbolic gesture for cameras, a full, formal salute in front of the entire room. Mara's breath caught. She returned it badly at first, then steadier, muscle memory finding its way through years of being buried. After the ceremony, the auditorium did not empty quickly. People lingered near the display case, reading the handwritten card, whispering Mara's name with the reverence they had once reserved for the false program. Some looked ashamed. Some looked curious. A few wanted to apologize but did not know how. The resident who mocked her tattoos approached near the side aisle. "Nurse Vale," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry." Mara studied him. He seemed young now, younger than he had when he laughed. "Learn faster next time," she said. He nodded, face red, and stepped away. The hospital director promised a formal review. Jenna demanded that the review include nursing staff witnesses, not just command representatives. To Mara's surprise, the director agreed. Admiral Halbrook assigned 2 officers to secure the artifact documents. Colonel Voss remained behind a closed door, speaking to people whose questions would not be softened by ceremony. Mrs. Russ waited until the crowd thinned before approaching Mara again. "Can I ask one thing?" she said. "Anything." Mrs. Russ looked at the jacket Mara wore. "Did Aaron really sew?" A small laugh escaped Mara, painful and warm. "Badly." Mrs. Russ smiled through tears. "He did everything badly the first time. He got better at the patch," Mara said. "But he complained the whole time." The mother laughed then, and the sound was so alive that Mara had to look away. Mrs. Russ reached into her purse and took out a small envelope. "I brought this because Colonel Voss said they might display family items beside the helmet. I didn't want to at first, but maybe it belongs with you. Inside was a photograph. Aaron Russ stood in a field jacket 2 sizes too big, grinning at someone outside the frame. On his shoulder was the black patch, new then. The white line bright against the square. Beside him, half visible at the edge of the photo, was a woman with dark hair tied back, her face turned away, one hand raised as if telling him to stop posing and get back to work. Mara knew that hand. She had never seen the picture before. Her fingers trembled so violently that Mrs. Rusk steadied the photograph. He wrote on the back. The mother said. Mara turned it over. "If I don't come home, find the nurse who keeps stealing my jacket. She'll tell you I wasn't useless." Mara pressed the photo to her chest. For 12 years she had carried Aaron's last minutes. Now, for the first time, she held proof of his humor, his ordinary warmth, the part of him not trapped inside a military file. Mrs. Rusk touched her arm, right where the tattooed coordinates began. "Were you the nurse?" Mara nodded. "Then tell me someday," Mrs. Rusk said. "Not today. Someday when you can." "I will." Across the auditorium, Admiral Halbrook stood by the display case, looking at the helmet. When Mara approached, he did not turn immediately. "I knew Harker," he said. "I thought you might." He trained half the medics who thought rules were suggestions when people were dying. Mara smiled faintly. "That sounds like him." Halbrook looked at her. "He mentioned a nurse once. Stubborn. Terrible at saluting. Good at finding doors." Mara swallowed hard. "He tried to get your record corrected," Halbrook said. "The request vanished before it reached my desk. I should have known. You couldn't know what they hid. A commander is responsible for what stays hidden under his command." Mara had no answer for that. The Admiral handed her the cracked badge. "Evidence team photographed it. We will need it again. But not tonight." She stared at it in her palm. "For years," she said, "I thought if I let go of this, they'd disappear." "They won't," Halbrook said. "Not anymore." Mara looked at the display case, at the handwritten card, at Jenna helping Keen's daughter adjust his wheelchair blanket, at Mrs. Rusk holding the photo like a candle. "No," she said softly, "not anymore." That evening, after the auditorium lights dimmed and the flags were taken down, Mara returned alone. The display case had been secured under guard, but the glass still reflected the stage lights. She stood before it in her scrubs and old jacket, looking at the patch that had once lived in darkness and now rested where people could read the truth beside it. For the first time in 12 years, the old jacket felt lighter on her shoulders. Jenna found her there. "I knew there was something about you," Jenna said. Mara glanced over. "The tattoos didn't give it away." "No? The way you never let anyone call a patient hopeless." Mara looked back at the helmet. Jenna stood beside her in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said, "What happens tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," repeated. "Yes, after a room full of officers finds out the tattooed nurse they laughed at was erased from a classified operation." Mara breathed out slowly. "Tomorrow Mrs. Alvarez in 402 will still complain about her breakfast. Mr. complain about her breakfast. Keen will pretend he doesn't need help transferring to therapy. The new interns will still put supply carts in the wrong hallway. I'll still be a nurse." Jenna smiled. "Jen, the review." "That too." "And Voss?" Mara's expression sobered. "He'll answer for what he signed." "Is that enough?" Mara watched her reflection in the glass overlap with the helmet, the patch, and the badge. "No," she said, "but it is more than silence." Jen nodded. Before they left, Mara reached into her jacket and touched the empty space where the hidden patch had been. The lining was rough where the thread had been cut. For years, that hidden square had been proof only to her. Now its absence was proof of something else. She did not have to carry the whole story alone. At the auditorium doors, she paused and looked back one last time. Earlier that morning, Colonel Voss had told her to stay back. And the room had laughed because they thought power lived only on the stage. They thought tattoos meant trouble, an old jacket meant shame, and a nurse standing in the aisle could be dismissed with a command. They had not known the jacket carried a patch. They had not known the patch carried a route. They had not known the helmet carried initials. They had not known a buried file still had a name waiting inside it. Mara turned off the last light. In the soft darkness, the white line on the black patch still seemed to glow, pointing toward a door that had finally opened. And this time, when Mara walked out, no one told her to stay back. Some people are laughed out of rooms that should have honored them first. Some carry proof in old jackets under scars, behind silence, waiting for the day truth finds a voice strong enough to speak. If Mara's story moved you, leave your country in the comments. Remember the quiet heroes around you, and subscribe for more hidden patch stories.